As you recall in earlier training videos, when we inserted a function or formula, as you can see with this selected cell up in the formula bar, we got a formula that we also wanted to go ahead and use in these other cells, but we didn't want to retype it, so we copied and pasted it. Well, every time you copy and paste that formula, it updated it and it changed. What did it change? Well, it was relative to what we pasted it into. If it was in another column, just updated the references to reflect the new column that we were in. So here's column C. The next formula, it updated to column D, and so on. Goes with the rows here. So when we take a formula and we copy it down row by row, it keeps the same formula, but it updates it and it changes it to reflect the next row. Again, that's a relative reference where it always changes and updates when you copy that formula. Well, what if you come across a formula that you don't want it to update when you copy it to other cells? That's what we're going to learn here, and it's known as an absolute reference. It's a cell reference in a formula that remains the same when the formula is copied to other cells. Let me show you. I got a formula that I want to insert over here to calculate the commission. So we have the total that the employee earned for that month or brought in, and we want to multiply it by this cell here, 8%, to find out or figure out the commission. So let's go ahead and hit the equals key on the keyboard, select that cell, and the symbol for multiplication is the asterisk. Go ahead and type that in. Then select the other cell, the 8%, and hit enter. Okay, there's the commission rate and what they earned for those 4 months, and hopefully it's in thousands of dollars. So you'd think, hey, let me just go ahead and select the cell and copy and paste it so I don't have to retype that formula over and over again. Well, you can go ahead and try, but watch what happens. When I Control C to copy it and Control V as in Victor to paste it, and then paste it, and then paste it. Oh, what the fudge? I'm getting all these weird things. How come this isn't working? Let me hit the escape key to get rid of the marching ants. Well, this is where we don't want it to update when we go ahead and we copy that formula to another cell. Well, what part of the formula do we not want it to update or change? And we want it to be absolute, stay where it's at, and be constant. Well, let's go ahead and select the cell here and look up here in the formula bar. And you can click in the formula bar. When you copy and paste, this one is going to go down row by row as we advance to the next row, but so is the commission. Does that make sense? Let me hit the escape key and go down to the next cell and come up here and click in the formula bar. You see how it's relative? Excel's just doing the same thing as a pattern, saying, okay, well, I'm down to the next row, so let's go ahead and move this reference down to the next row, but there's nothing there. So that doesn't work. When it comes to commission, we want it to stay in cell H3. We want it to be absolute, constant, don't move. But the other part of the formula, the reference, needs to go ahead and move down so we can get the other commissions calculated for each employee. So how are we going to do this? Let me hit the escape key on the keyboard, go back to the original formula. Oh, by the way, how come it goes from 0 to value? Well, just double click. It's trying to multiply a cell that contains text, and that's why you get the value error, as opposed to, let me hit the escape key, a double click, where you have nothing in there, and it's multiplying a number, so you get 0. You can do a little homework on that, find out why you get the different types of errors just by digging down into the formula and finding out the references of those cells. Are you multiplying by text or an empty cell? And that's what we're looking at in this case. Hit the escape key. Let's go back to the original formula, and let's go ahead and come up here in the formula bar. And what cell do we want to stay as an absolute cell? It's going to be H3. This one right here, the commissions. So when we go ahead and we copy and paste it, it doesn't move. We want this dog, Fido, to stay. What you need to do is click before that cell reference H3 and hit the F4 key on the keyboard. When you hit the F4 key on the keyboard, it inserts these dollar signs, well, that are known as absolutes, meaning that the dollar sign next to the H says keep the H column put. In other words, we can copy and paste this formula wherever we want, but it will always reference the H column. Now, not just the H column, but we also have the dollar sign next to the 3, so it's saying always reference that row. And when you put them together, it says it's always going to be H3. That will never move, never change, no matter where you copy and paste this formula into. But this part of the formula that we're referencing will update wherever we paste it. But this part won't, because it's always going to be referring to that cell. And I call it Fido because, think about it, F4. F is for Fido. And how many letters do you have in Fido? F-I-D-O, 4. Hey, that's the way I remember things. So once we do that and we put an absolute, do not move, these dollar signs next to the H and the 3, and the F4 key was a shortcut. You don't have to use F4. You can go ahead and type in the dollar sign next to the cell before H and before 3 or whatever cell you're using, that's fine. And not only that, but if you hit F4 again, it'll toggle through and say, okay, we'll just keep the row 3. The H will update if you copy it in another column, or you can hit F4 again and say, okay, the H has to stay. In other words, it's always going to be referencing that column, but if you move to a new row, it'll update to another row, or F4 again to remove the absolutes and go back to just a simple relative reference here. Again, F4 solidifies and says stay in that column, in that row, always H3. Go ahead and hit enter. So when I click and drag the autofill handle down, or copy and paste, or double click really fast on the autofill handle, automatically copies it down to the end of the range that it can see logically, and we get the correct number because when you double click, it didn't update and pull this down, that part of the referencing in the cell. It stayed. Fido stayed, F4, right? The dollar symbols, the absolutes. But it updated that part of the cell reference, so we can go to the next row here for that employee and hit the escape key and double click, and it can go down to the next row, but again it's always staying on that cell, the commission cell, so we get accurate results. So that, and maybe other times where you're copying and pasting where you're only referencing one cell and you always want it to be that one cell and not have it updated as you copy and paste along, then go ahead and use those absolute references, the dollar signs, where you can go ahead and have it for both the column and the row so it doesn't change, or what's referred to as a mixed reference, where it's only referencing of the H3, maybe just the 3 is going to have the dollar sign, or maybe just the H is going to have the dollar sign or the absolute, so it's always going to be referencing that column, but never the same row. Depending upon if you're pasting column by column, it'll stay in that column, but if you're pasting row by row, well, it's relative because we don't have the dollar sign there, so let's go ahead and add it back in and hit enter. And let's see, I want to give them something a little bit extra to get ready for Christmas, so let's increase their commission by 10%, hit enter, and you can see it updates all of the cells there because these formulas are all dependent upon the value within this cell and also the totals here as well. And you can see how it automatically updated them just by changing the number here or changing any of the totals here. But I won't do that because the totals here are based upon the numbers here, which I can go ahead and change. It'll update that, which in turn, once that's updated, because that one's looking at that cell, it'll update that as well. So if we type something like 1,000, 10,000, wow, that's sweet. Let's go ahead and hit undo.